Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17, U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing, nonprofit, educational, or personal use, tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, you guys, I am going to read from this book, page 88. Highly recommend reading this book. It gives you a lot more insight into Scientology and how they disconnect families, and how a lot of times you think things are a certain way and they're not what you think. The mothers and grandmothers oftentimes do care about their children. And these vipers, these tarantulas, these awful, like, spiders that are trying to get to the children, they have, like, numerous manipulative ways that they get to the children. And it's sickening. And I'm going to be reading more from this book. I want to, if I had the stones to do it, I would read the whole book, but that's too much. But there are some chapters that I do want to go through regarding how Sea Org recruiters recruit. A lot of times they recruit the children when they're 12, 13 years old. If they don't get them in, they just hound them, and they hound them, and they hound them, and they hound them. And then they, even if the child does not want to go, and they manipulate, they lie, they bait them, they tell them anything they can to make them go in. And then they have these minors. By law, they're minors. And by the way, I was right regarding all the guardianship, the stuff that's going on with it. It's diabolical. And our government is not doing anything about what's happening with these guardianships. It is bad. So, yeah, I will be reading some of the excerpts or chapters talking about how these Sea Org recruiters, which I really wished I had the names to, were recruiting these young children. And they recruit from the public as well. So a lot of times the public Scientologists are living a little, depending on who they are living a little more free life, depending on how involved they are in Scientology. Some are just not as involved because they're not into it, but they just stay because they don't want to lose their family or whatever. So the part I'm going to be reading about is where Lori Hodgson, her and her grandmother, her mother, which is the grandmother to the children, had they had sent in their resignation letter to Scientology. And you guys know where that's going to go, right? So they had basically been being harassed and blackmailed for almost like a really long time to take the children, basically. And Lori Hodgson was divorced from her husband, her ex-husband, which was a huge part in all of this. And it is repugnant what she has gone through. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, get your kids out. And the fact is that a lot of the mothers are trying, and the shit they do is illegal, which the government does nothing about, diabolical, evil, malicious, malevolent, you name it. So the part I'm going to be reading to you, it's on page 88, and this is after herself and her mother have turned in their resignations. Both the children did finally, Jeremy, went into the Sea Org by huge pressure when he finally went in when he was around 16. And then he left because he hated it. And then they blackmailed the 16-year-old, which is against the law, but, guess we don't have laws here. And then Jessica, whom was older, by this time she's turned 18. I don't think she went into the Sea Org, but the ex-husband really got to the children as well as other Scientologists that were diabolical. There were actually quite a few Scientologists trying to help, believe it or not. So it's like it's just so easy to judge if we're not in those shoes. But there were a lot of Scientologists that were actually trying to help her and her mother. So in order for her to be, because the children have disconnected, her son's 16, which is, can you see how against the law this is? And then, well, her daughter was 18, so it was, on her, but they did a lot of coercing her and telling her all kinds of mind control lies, etc. And in order for her to be able to see her children again, they were blackmailing her, well, of course they weren't giving her money back. She had paid $11,000 for courses, which she never did the courses. They would not give her money back. And then they wanted her to take all these courses again, which she'd already taken, she was out of Scientology, she was done. And then they wanted her to take all these courses again at her own expense, of course. You see what a Ponzi scheme this is? And then they wanted her to take these A&E steps. And I'm going to read page 88, and I'm going to go however long I feel is needed to explain what these A&E steps are. Apparently, they wanted her to do the A&E steps. Probably wanted her mother to do it as well. What a trap it is. The A&E steps are steps on how to get back in good standing with Scientology if one has been declared a suppressive person. Being critical of Scientology, being anti-Scientology, speaking out publicly about Scientology are just a few of the various reasons one can be declared a suppressive person by Scientology. And by the way, they terrify people with this. They terrify them. In my case, I simply resigned from Scientology and just 1 week later was threatened with Scientology disconnection, which meant I would lose my own 2 children. Like I said, the ex had a lot to do with this too. After 4 months had passed, I went to see a former Scientologist, so she's hiding the name, which sometimes I can appreciate, to help me because my kids were pulling away from me. The following day, I got threatened again in the parking lot. Threats and intimidation. Threats of violence right in public eye, In the parking lot, at work. I wish some of these MNFers would come to my little, to the sticks and do this shit. The following day, I got threatened again in the parking lot at work by a Scientologist who also was a big influence on my kids to disconnect from me. I spoke out publicly about this man threatening me and the injustices that Scientology had inflicted on my children and me. I got declared a suppressive person for that, although Scientology never called me in directly to tell me that. They never do, I don't think. I just heard from a few of my friends that I was declared. I have tried reaching out to my kids in person, through text and email, via friends and family. And lastly, tried to work directly with the International Justice Chief, IJC of Scientology, who I was told is the only person in Scientology I can talk to. Nothing worked, and supposedly nothing will unless I do these gruesome A through E steps. She didn't want to go back to Scientology, but they're trying to force her, which they're good for that. It's too long to go over all the steps, but I will explain a few of them from what I understand them to be. I would have to stop speaking out about my disconnection with my kids and just to shut my mouth. Like a gag order or like a non-disclosure agreement that like Rinder wanted Miriam Francis and God knows how many other people to sign. Then make a public announcement that my actions for speaking out were ignorant and not based on facts. So like kind of like, I don't know what word I would use for that. I would have to retrain on all Scientology courses I had previously done at my expense. How's that for bait and switch, man? Another step would be to do a long and arduous amends project for Scientology, and only the IJC can approve when they feel I've done enough. Can you tell how misogynistic this organization is? I mean, they terrorize men as well, but it's very misogynistic. I can't do these A&E steps because I'm not lying about what happened to my children and me. Scientology destroyed my family, and by the way, she had a good support in her husband, whom was not a Scientologist, and that's a long story. I think what needs to happen is that Scientology apologizes to me. That's like telling a narcissist to apologize. And gives me my family back. I also never want to be a Scientologist again, so why would I want to retrain everything? As I've said countless times before, I just want to be Jessica and Jeremy's mom. You see, there are mothers that want their children. They want to be good mothers. That's all I've ever wanted. And if Scientology had not taken my sweet children from me, then we wouldn't be in this awful, inhumane situation. No religion or group should ever break up a family. Apparently, the United States government thinks that's okay to do. They're fine with it. They don't have a problem. They don't arrest people for crimes, you know. I hope my children can read what the A&E steps really are, because my son once told me that I could do the A through E steps and not be a Scientologist. He doesn't understand that, yes, I would have to go back to being a Scientologist to do these steps. They really worked on her son. Her son at this point was 16 years old. Her son really kind of wasn't into it. She was trying to get her children, and then I'll go back to it. She was trying to get her young children to be exposed to public school, which her ex-husband didn't like he wanted them in Scientology school. And they were in like a little bit, but she kept putting them back in public. And her son was really enjoying it. I think he was in football, and he liked mountain biking, and he had a lot of friends at school, and he was really enjoying it. And her daughter was as well. And at the time, her daughter was talking about going to college and everything, and that's what the mom and the mom's husband, Lori's husband, wanted. And Scientology and the ex-husband weren't having that. They weren't going to have children that would have friends or have a driver's license. All the things that they were supposed to agree to when the son went into Sea Org, they didn't follow up with anything, which is, I understand they do this a lot. The son was supposed to get his driver's license. He didn't get that. He was supposed to finish his orthodontic work for his teeth. They didn't do that. And there was a bunch of stuff. And she had signed guardianship over to this couple. They didn't do anything that was legally bound in that guardianship. So right now, as we speak, there are people that have guardianship over children in Scientology, and they are not legally following what they are supposed to do. And there are parents that want their children out, or they at least want to expose them to other things. And they're forcing these children into this. That's illegal, bro. And it's about time someone does something about it. So I'm going to go back to it now. I'm clearly seeing now the strong signs of my kids disconnecting from me. On February 1st, 2011, I received this text message from my daughter. Okay, honestly, I don't feel comfortable going to you and CR's birthday dinner and sitting there acting like nothing is wrong when I'm very enturbulated, upset about what is happening. I do wish you and CR a very happy birthday, but I'm not going to come on Saturday. I will be there for Papa's on Sunday to wish him a happy birthday and see the family. You see, that was a dig. Someone was coaching her, too. She was around 18 here. Since my mom and I could not be handled, my children were manipulated and forced to disconnect from us as of February 6, 2011. I remember that day very clearly. I'm not certain who manipulated Jessica, but when she sent me texts, and my only terminal was the International Justice Chief, I clearly knew someone was telling her that she probably didn't even know the IJC existed before that. Like I said earlier, I do not know who it was who finally got to Jeremy and swayed him to disconnect from me. Who was 16, by the way, you guys. And it'd be really interesting to see Natalie Webster's take on this, like since she was able to get her family out. Because Natalie wasn't having it. She freaking camped her ass out at the Blue Building and like, you're giving me my daughter back. You can't do this legally. But of course, in this situation, Lori has to deal with this psychotic Scientologist ex-husband who's a psycho. Which the government's all about that. I'm not certain who manipulated Jessica, but when she sent me texts, I already read that. Like I said earlier, I do know who it was who finally got to Jeremy and swayed him to disconnect from me. It was Rick Melrose. He was a man I had known for a long time. You see how they turn on you? So any Scientologists listening to what I'm reading here, I'm sorry to say, a lot of the people you think your friends are in there, they're not. They'll turn on you. He was a man I had known for a long time. I knew him when I was a teenager at the Stevens Creek Mission. He was one of the lecturers for new Scientologists. I saw him later back in the middle 90s. He was a chaplain for the San Jose Mission, where I was doing services. He even was a chaplain for me and CR regarding some issues we were having. Rick made things worse. CR and I didn't like talking with him, so we worked things out on our own. Then after I resigned, Pat, the mission holder, had Jeremy come in and talk to Rick. This person I thought was a friend revealed himself to be a cold Scientologist who persuaded my son to not see me anymore. See? There's a part in here too, where she actually went to Marty Rathburn, and it seems like Marty Rathburn was trying to help her. So the confusion for me is real. I've heard some positive accounts of Marty Rathburn, but I don't know. Devils have positive traits once in a while too, so I don't know. I do wonder why Rathburn parted ways with Rinder. I kind of know, but it does make you wonder what really did happen, you know what I mean? February 6th was my dad's birthday, and my birthday is February 8th. We were all meeting for dinner to celebrate on February 6, 2011. I was really nervous when my husband and I arrived. We got there early. Everyone was there except my kids. They arrived shortly after and pretty much ignored me. They sat at the opposite side of our large table. It was the most uncomfortable family get-together ever. My kids were shunning me in front of the family. When everyone was about to leave, my son hugged me. And also, too, she talked about how her son seemed to be okay with her leaving Scientology, and there were some things that happened with him in the Sea Org that he was forced to sign this goofy $3 million contract, which was not bindable by law, and told that if he talked about what happened in the Sea Org, which really makes me wonder, was it SA? I don't know. He was told that if he talked about it, he has to pay $3 million back, which he's 16, by the way, and that his eternity will be ruined. Like, he won't have his eternity, which they use a lot. My kids were shunning me in front of the family. When everyone was about to leave, my son hugged me, but not my daughter. That was it. And the saddest day, because it was the first day my kids cut all ties with me. It was heartbreaking, to say the least. Can imagine as a mother, how that felt. Also that February, my half-sister was pregnant, and Jeremy and Jessica could not be there to revel in the joy of seeing their new baby cousin and become a part of his life. My half-sister and half-brother were raised Catholic and were never Scientologists. My dad and stepmom were never Scientologists. I think she had that going for her as well. And her stepmom and father never talked badly about Scientology. They did at the very beginning when she joined, and then they learned really fast that if they did talk about it, they were all going to be disconnected, so then they stopped saying anything. I personally think they probably never liked Scientology, I'm sure. They couldn't understand this whole disconnection thing and why Jeremy and Jessica were now distant from our family. They got to their minds. They controlled them. They handled them. Also in my family is my stepdad, Val, and he is not a Scientologist. Val has 2 daughters. Mom introduced them both to Scientology, which was a mistake, of course. And only one became a Scientologist. When Mom and I left Scientology, my Scientology stepsister also disconnected from us. So the only Scientologists in my family were my kids and my stepsister. My kids ended up disconnecting from my whole family, including the 9 Scientologists. They also disconnected from all our friends that were still in contact with me or my mom. My kids' Facebook pages are monitored by the Scientology Facebook police, and they make sure my kids are not in touch with any of my family or mutual friends. There's ways around that, by the way. There's a lot of ways around that. I'm not on Facebook anymore. I was on it for a long time. I'm not on. They watch my kids like hawks, and to this day they have Scientologists keeping an eye on all their social media accounts. My kids were very close with all the family members I mentioned, and I know they were heartbroken not to have their family around anymore. This is how Scientology destroyed my family. The non-Scientologists did not understand this cruelty that Scientology enforces in breaking up families. My cousin was very close with Jessica, but Jessica had to disconnect from her too because my cousin stays in touch with me. Anyone can clearly see that by making my kids shut everyone out, they will have no chance to hear any criticism about Scientology. This is how Scientology keeps their members controlled. It is so wrong that Scientology has the power to break up families, and in my opinion, that makes Scientology one of the most despicable organizations on earth. So that's her story, and there are a lot like this. In fact, if we were able to dig really deep, I'll bet you there's a lot of stories about how mothers had their children basically ripped from their arms. And the government's all about that. They're fine with it. So, anyways, I'm not going to leave a link, but I highly recommend you guys go get this book. It's on Amazon. It's pretty reasonable. Very good book. Very well written. And it's really sad that the only way that ex-Scientologists have to get their story out is through books. But now we've got YouTube and we got a lot of places. So I hope any mother or father trying to get their children out never gives up. And hopefully the mind control will break one day and they'll see, So have a good day, everyone. Peace.